certainly can speak to the light. So studying this photograph, we thought this was indications of an ancient city here, and in fact that large square looks like it should be a fort. And in our investigations we've discovered that that's true. We've dug part of that area and it is a fort. But for us now, the most interesting part of the site is this building here. Can I give you that? So we're standing on the large mound of Kalatka. This is a huge stone mound, and for 2,000 years, no one knew what this mound was. It was a mystery. But when we started digging, we discovered actually the remains of a palace from the Parthian period. So this is about 2,000 years old. Now, have any of you heard of Alexander the Great?
No.
So Alexander the Great, he was a Greek king, and he conquered from Greece all the way to India and back. And after him was an empire called the Parthian Empire. It started in what's now Iran, then it came into Iraq, it went further west, and then it collapsed. Now, can you hold the microphone for me, please? Thank you. What's amazing about this building is it's covered in these roof tiles. Could you give me the small piece, please? So if you pass this round. Now, in Kurdistan, for a long time, for thousands of years, you make your roofs by having wooden poles and mats and mud. But this is different. These are baked clay tiles, and this idea starts in the Mediterranean, to the west of here, in Greece, in Italy, in Syria. And it's very unusual, very exciting to find a building roofed with these kind of tiles.
Is that a stone or mud?
It's clay. How do you say clay in Kurdish? Good. So it's clay which has been baked. So these are baked clay roof tiles. But you're right to ask about the stone. So you see the building is made of stone. On top it had the baked clay roof tiles, but we also think it had mud brick. Is that hushed? We also think there was mud brick. The reason for that, if you look in the doorway here, you see there's lots of mud filling the door.
Yeah.
Now, where did that mud come from?
From the palace?
It came from the palace, and we think either it's because there was a floor made of wood and mud, or there was a whole upper story made of mud bricks. So we think the reason we have mud here is the mud has fallen down into this trench here. Now, when we excavate, it's very important to have people who do the digging, and Dr. Sarah over here is the archaeologist in charge of this area.
Okay.
But when we dig, we don't just dig, we need to document the remains, we need to photograph what we find, we need to draw it, and then any objects we send into our dig house, we call it a dig house, and then Ewout is our conservator, so any careful objects which might break or in a very difficult condition, he knows how to mend them or to stabilize them so they don't deteriorate. And we also have Alberto, our photographer, who is just here. So any excavation is going to need a conservator, it's going to need a photographer. We have people who study the ancient animals and the ancient plants. So I'm going to teach you some very difficult words. In English, when you study animals, that's called zoology.
Zoology?
Zoology. And if you study ancient animal remains, we call it archaeozoology.
Archaeozoology.
You're perfect. So it's a mixture of archaeology and zoology, archaeozoology. So I'm going to ask you a question. So when we study ancient plants, we call it, when we study plants, we call it botany. So what do you think we call studying ancient plants?
I don't know.
I'm going to tell you, it's archaeobotany.
Archaeobotany.
So we have all these specialists. So the first half of our job is coming here and excavating, and the second half is studying the remains. So I'll tell you what else we found here. We found a whole city. Just on this side here, it's like a low ridge, so like a long, low hill. And this is actually the ancient city wall. And the reason they had a wall on the west is they thought their enemies were on the west. Now, can anyone think who a big enemy was 2,000 years ago in the west?
In the west?
In the west. Coming from Italy.
Italy?
I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a clue. It's the Romans. That's a great question. The whole site, so from here, as far as the gravel quarry, as far as the stone, this is all the archaeological site, and it was bigger than a village. I'd say it was a small city, but the building we're on we think it's a palace, but it's a good question. We don't know if it was a palace or a temple. Now I'm going to borrow the book from, I'm going to show you our best find.
But sorry for interrupting, but do you study ancient letters? Do you study ancient letters?
I will answer that question for you. The answer is yes. I will find something else first. Okay, so that's great you're asking questions. If you want to ask a question, put your hand up and I'll answer your question. So first of all, what's your name? So Lennon asked me, do I study ancient letters? Actually, I do. I like studying ancient languages. The one I study mostly is ancient Assyrian. So some of you may know in northern Iraq, you had an Assyrian empire. In fact, when we go to our other site, that's Assyrian. So I like reading ancient Assyrian. Now, I want to tell you about our best find in this site. Ava, can you just stand next to that child, make sure he doesn't fall in. Thank you. Okay, our best find from this site is this statue here. And it's about, what's your name? What's her name?
Delia.
Okay, it's about the height of Delia. So it's what we call half-life size. It's not the size of a full adult person, it's half-life size. And it shows a man or a boy. He hasn't got any clothes on in this statue. And
That's real.
This is real. This is real. And it's made out of stone. And the stone is called alabaster. Okay. If you want to ask a question, put up your hand. Yes, it's a statue, and it's either a statue of a man or maybe of an ancient god. We're not sure. So it's an important question. Good question.
Ask you a question. How did you bring out the rocks and the other things inside the sphinx?
That's really hard work, and Dr. Sarah is in charge of that. So I'll say two things. You have to work carefully to see what you're doing, make sure you don't damage anything, and then you remove it with a pick, with a pachu. And then we have many workmen here who help carry the rocks and the earth out.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
How did you find this place to dig in and find things from here?
We found this place by looking at the satellite image from the 1960s, but also there's a local historian called Abdurraqib Yusuf, and in the 1970s he discovered this city and he made many notes and many photographs of it. Any more questions about this site?
Okay. So, who gave you this thing that came to Kurdistan and found this thing?
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but first of all, I'd say we have permission to dig here. So we can't just come from England or France or any other country. We can't just come here and start digging. Archaeology is very precious, it's very important, and you need permission from the government. So in Kurdistan, the Directorate of Antiquities of Kurdistan is in charge of archaeology. So Mr. Kafi, who's the Director of Archaeology, he gave us permission to dig here.
Where did you find this thing?
Right, that's a good question. So that statue, it's not as simple as you think. In fact, archaeology is often not as simple as you think. So we did not find this as one piece. We found this as three pieces. So the main body from the neck down to here, halfway down the leg, that was one big piece. Then the lower right leg was a different piece, and the arm and elbow was another piece. But what's really surprising is they were in three different rooms. One was in a square room just over there, one was in a room further over that way, and one was in a room behind me. So this means the statue was broken and deliberately put in different places. Now, why would someone break a statue and put it in different places? Any ideas?
Maybe they found it for enemies to, like. Yes. Maybe they found it much more harder for the enemies to find them and put it together. Maybe it was like some kind of treasure for them to, like, protect from their enemies.
That's great. So that's. I think there's two main ideas. I think you've hit on one of the ideas. I think that's a good idea. And the other is sort of the opposite, is maybe the enemies came here and they destroyed the building, destroyed the statue, and they deliberately spread it around. And we don't know the answer. It's an important question, but we don't know the answer.
Can I ask another question?
I'll ask you after.
Here, was a palace or a house?
Okay, that's a. You're asking me all the difficult questions. You're making me use my brain, which that makes me very tired.
Sorry.
No, it's a good question, and we don't know. So often in archaeology, we don't know. And sometimes we just don't know and we never find out. And sometimes we don't know, but we think about it and we dig some more and slowly we learn. So this could have been a palace or a temple, so temple for worshipping a god, and we don't know the answer to that. We would like to find out the answer. The girl here had a question first.
Thank you. This picture, this is just a picture or it's real?
Well, this is just a picture, but the object is real. So we found it in the building here. We found it. Dr. Ewout is conserving it, so he's cleaning it. You have to clean something like this very carefully. And to glue the pieces together, it's not like you or me. We can't just get out the glue from our cupboard and glue it. You need special glue and you need special knowledge as well. And people who are trained to do that are called conservators. And that's what Dr. Ewout is.
How many long time you are trying to find this?
So we started here about 4 years ago, and we come every year for about 2 months every year.
So when you find this thing, where did you where did you keep it?
Where do we keep it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, an object like this is very important, very precious. So we have to keep it in a special place, and we keep it in the museum. So first of all, in Sulaymaniyah, there's a museum there. They've got a safe, an underground room for that. But eventually, we hope one day there will be a museum in ڕانییە. And I should mention, I forgot to mention earlier, we work here with Kak Barzan. He's the Director of Antiquities for ڕانییە, for ڕاپەڕین. So we're very lucky he's a wonderful person to work with, and he's also planning to have a museum. So one day, I really hope this will be in a museum here in your hometown in ڕانییە.
Thank you. Which part you found first?
First was the elbow, and we found the elbow on the last day of our excavating in the first year. We were very excited, and we hoped we'd find more, and the next year we found another bit and another bit. Who hasn't asked the question yet? Yeah.
How many years ago those peoples was living in here?
Oh, that's interesting. So the short answer is about 2,000 years ago, but there's no one answered the question. But there's a special way of dating. Now there's a chemical called carbon. Chemical isn't quite the right word, but anyway, there's a chemical called carbon. And if you have burnt wood or burnt materials, you can use this for dating. You'll have to ask your teachers to explain it one day. But we analysed pieces of carbon. We sent them to a laboratory in Scotland, and from this we know that this building was built about 125 BC, so that's 2,125 years ago, and it was destroyed about 60 BC, so that's about 2,060 years ago.
I need to go to it and see there.
Can you go down here? You mean? Okay. Unfortunately, I can't allow you down there. It's too dangerous. Archaeological sites are dangerous places. Sometimes if a visitor comes, like if Mr. Kafey, the director from Erbil comes, of course we will allow him to come down and look, but we can't allow people to go down and run around or even walk around. It's too dangerous.
You are just working in here, or there's more places to work to find these things?
Well, this site is amazing. As I've already told you, this is from a period called the Parthian period. And we know this was a big empire for 400 years, but very little is known about it. So it's extremely exciting to find that Kurdistan has a major site of the Parthian period. We don't know of another site just like this in Kurdistan now, but we do know of small sites from this period. But your country, Kurdistan in Iraq, is full of archaeology. It's one of the great archaeological centres in the entire world. Okay.
So how did you start to work here? Did you have any informations?
Yeah, we did have information, as I mentioned, from the satellite image and from a local historian. He helped us.
Did you work in any more places like that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. What was your question?
Did you work in any more places like that?
Yes, so I've worked in about 5 or 6 different places in Iraq, and I've worked in about, and I've worked in 10 or 12 other countries.
Who made that?
We don't know. Great question. We don't know. Maybe the kings of Parthia, maybe coming from Iran. They invaded Iraq in around 140 BC. But we do. I would love. One of your colleagues asked me, do I read ancient inscriptions, ancient writing? We call it ancient inscriptions. I love reading them, but we haven't found any. I would love to find it. I'd love to find a stone which says that I made this building and tell us the name, but we haven't done that. I need someone who hasn't had a question yet. Where?
When you guys find this
We
thing?
found the first bit 3 years ago, and the next 2 bits 2 years ago, and a few smaller pieces last year.
Is there much to find in the city?
Yes. Okay, that's important. The question was, is there much to find in this city? There's a huge amount. So even this mound we're not finished. But last year we did something called geophysical survey. So there's a machine which measures the magnetic field. And amazingly, you can use this to map. So it can see underground, effectively.
What is the name of the machine?
It's called a magnetometer.
Magnetometer.
Yeah, magnetometer. So my friend from America, Dr. Tim, he mapped about 1/10 of the city using a magnetometer, and in most places you could see the outlines of buildings. I'll show you something. This isn't magnetometry, but it's close enough. So it can give you pictures like this. So these are things, this was a plan you could not see with the naked eye on the ground, but looking underneath the ground with the magnetometer, you can see lines here, and these are the remains of city walls. So we know that all this area is archaeology, and there must be lots of interesting things.
The machine gave you this picture?
The machine gave this picture, but again, you need the machine, but you need to know how to use it. So I wouldn't know how to do it. It's interesting. So archaeology, it's a very nice profession because you have many specialists coming together: the conservator, the photographer, magnetometer, satellite image specialist, people who read ancient languages, and it's very good teamwork. So no one can do everything, but you can work together. If you work together well, you get.
Can I start?
Yep.
Okay. Who helped you to dig these houses or these places?
Well, here it was Dr. Sarah and Alder, who is from Kurdistan. And in the different rooms, we've had different archaeologists in the different rooms. Okay, just keep a little bit away from the trench, please. Okay, yes? How can you make it? Actually, I'm not sure how that... Interesting about this building is it's big stone walls with stone and mud, and they obviously were very good builders, because if I tried building a building out of stone and mud, it would collapse, I'm sure, but they did it. Okay, we're going to go to the other side, and you can ask questions in the other side.